Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of Breakthroughs with Bree, where we are having breakthroughs about our personal and spiritual development journeys, all in pursuit of living our most joyful and authentic lives. My name's Bree. I'm an Akashic Records channeler, energy healer, astrologer, and personal and spiritual development coach. And on today's podcast, we are going to be talking about finding your limiting beliefs and breaking patterns. And I'm very excited for you to hear this. So let's get into it. Okay, everybody, on today's episode, I am so excited to welcome a mindset coach who I met in that Fear Alchemy program that you guys have heard a lot about. She helps purpose-driven professionals break unhelpful patterns that are standing in the way of creating success and fulfillment. So today, everybody, please welcome Lauren Plante. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. This is so cool.
I know we've been talking for a minute about doing an episode together, and
Mhm.
I'm just so excited it's like finally happening because I already know it's going to be a really good one.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely gonna happen.
Um, if you guys don't already know, and I'm going to tag her on Instagram, Lauren is a really amazing mindset coach. She posts a lot of really cool content of like brainwaves that she gets through the day about places where maybe we're tripping ourselves up or we're getting in our own way or just ways that we can access more success, fulfillment, and joy, really is how I would say it. And
Mhm.
I just resonated so much with a lot of her work. So I just like, I'm so excited for us to have this conversation today. But before we get into a little bit more about you and your work, you know the stuff that I like to ask all of my guests so that we can all just get to know you a little bit. So, if you
Yeah,
wouldn't mind, tell us big three, human design, if there's any other like cool personality tests or other things that you know about yourself. Take it away.
you got it. Yes, and it's so cool that you ask these questions because as I started like diving into these things, it helped me understand myself so I can even do this work better. So, I mean, I don't know all that much. All I know is that I am a Gemini moon, Gemini sun, and Scorpio rising. And I am a manifestor when it comes to my human design. But that's as far as it goes. I know the minimal, like surface level stuff,
Mm.
but I am your classic, like all of those things. I'm like, that is me. 100%.
I love it. Do you happen to know your profile type for your manifesting or your design as a manifester? That's the numbers. That's like the two numbers.
I don't. I did and I forget and I don't know where to find the information again. It's probably
Okay.
somewhere in my email somewhere, but
That is all good. Have you ever done any of those like Myers-Briggs or like Enneagram or any of that kind of stuff?
I did an Enneagram one time and I want to say I don't want to give you the wrong information, but I feel like I was a 2.
You probably were a two and three. That's like what a lot of them
Okay.
is. So the three is like the achiever and the two is the helper. And
Oh, here I am.
that's me. Hi.
Right there.
Present.
Yes.
And what's funny is when I did the Enneagram years and years ago, like when I was in like late high school or early college, I think I was a three wing two. So primarily like the achiever, whatever, which was
Mm.
classic for me. And then the two like as a secondary. And then later in adulthood, when I actually started coming into some of this more self-development and realizing some of my own patterns, it flopped. So helper primary and achiever secondary. And I was like, huh, interesting
Hmm.
how that happened. Okay, and my last question, which may or may not be the most important of all, if you were going to guess or if you know what your Hogwarts house would be, what is it?
You're gonna hate me. I've never even really watched Harry Potter. So I don't know. I don't that is yeah, that's the Hogwarts house
Yeah,
whole thing.
yeah,
Okay. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
embarrassing.
I honestly really don't mind when people say this because this gives me an opportunity to guess what I think yours would be.
Okay.
Um, I kind of feel like you'd be a Gryffindor.
Really now?
Yes.
Okay, so I do know the characters, as long as you
Yeah.
don't say Snape.
Yeah, the Slytherin stuff. Yeah. A lot of people don't love the Slytherin, but um what's funny is I've had a couple guests be like, you know what? Being a little bit of a rebel, Slytherin, like a little bit of a challenger, kind of ambitious, like, not afraid to claim it, whatever.
Okay.
And Gryffindor and Slytherin share more in common than a lot of people think. It's just like one was the villain and one was the good guy, and like people don't want to be associated with the villain.
Right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I get a Gryffindor like vibe off of you a little bit, which is a great thing. Like everybody loves a Gryffindor, you
I'll
know?
claim it. I will claim it.
She's like Gryffindor for life. If anybody asks me, I'm gonna be like, I haven't even
If
seen the
anybody
movie.
asks me this question again that I've never been asked again, I will tell everybody Gryffindor, yes.
Bree told me, and I'm running with it.
It's a done deal.
Oh man, I love that. Well, thank you for sharing all of those things. So the next thing I'd really love for you to share is a little bit of your story about like how you got into this type of work, maybe a little bit about like your style or your approach to this mindset coaching work, because I think that it will be very interesting for the listeners to hear.
Totally. Yeah, it was a real like life journey for me to find this work, which I think if you're in the right place, I feel like most people will say that, right? And so for me, when it comes to my career journey, it started off with I was in human behavior and I was working with kids breaking behavior patterns. And then I got into a job. I was a neurological education specialist. So then I was breaking mental patterns, and I was also opening up mental pathways for kids that had neurological disabilities. So that's when I kind of learned all of this type of like practices and modalities and information, and I took very deep interest, and that those jobs alone taught me the most about life like possible. I was like, wow, this is incredible, but I hated the 9 to 5 structure. Loved the work, loved what I was doing, hated the 9 to 5 structure. I am somebody who cannot be contained. And I know there's more than me out there. I cannot be put in a box. I cannot be told like when I'm working, when I'm not working. It's not in my personality. And I
Mhm.
knew that about myself. And I was like, I've got to get out of here. So I was like, I've got a really like business side to myself, along with like my airy, more like I can feel people, I can see people. I'm like, let me take a new dive into something new. So that's when I became a real estate agent. And when I got into real estate, I was like, wow, what is this independence? I started making so much money. I was like, this is more money than I've ever seen. I was like, this is incredible. But with all of that money and with all of that stuff came like, I got really lost, like lost in the sauce. I'm telling you, like, if anybody asked who I was, I'm like, I'm a real estate agent and I make a lot of money and I achieve a lot of things. Right. And nobody knew who Lauren was anymore. I didn't know who Lauren was. And I highly identified with like my accolades, like the things I had, the status, the money I had, the things I bought, the investments I made. Oh, I own 2 properties, like all of these things. And that's when I realized, like, okay, I was happy, but didn't have as much money and I didn't have the independence. Now I have the independence, I have the money, and I'm not happy. How do I find both? And that's when I was like, it's time to heal. And it's time to figure all this stuff out because you know the things about mindset and human behavior, and you know how to be a businesswoman, but you don't know who you are anymore. So I took 6 months off. I traveled, I healed, I got into programs, I went to retreats, I did all of the things. And I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm going to be a coach. And it first started off as me being a real estate coach, but then it was like this journey of finding myself like, what the heck? Like, I was in mindset and human behavior. Like, I'm a mindset coach. And that's what I keep coaching people on. And so this career found me. Like, I believe in somewhat of a destined path, and like my path created this career for me. And that's how I got here.
I love it. I love it. And I didn't know that about you that you started working with kids and
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh. So like
Oh,
what
yeah.
when you say children with neurological disorders or like what kind of kids were you working with? I'm just so curious.
So when I was working in human behavior, I was working with kids with severe PTSD.
Mm,
So it was a school for kids that gone through like serious trauma. Like I'm talking when one of my students, I'll give you an example. Whenever he got too stressed, what his behavior reaction was to crawl under his desk and start barking like a dog and start attacking his classmates.
mm,
Because when he was child, well, he was only, I don't know, 8 at the time anyway. But when he was really young, his parents kept him in a cage and fed him like a dog. Yes. So that's when I started to realize, like, oh, your past is what creates like your behavior when you're not conscious of it,
mhm,
when you're triggered, when you get to a certain state, when you pass your threshold of stress.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started applying this to myself
Mhm.
and started I think that's a big reason why I was so successful in real estate. Like a lot of people don't make it in real estate for what they say, right? And
Mhm.
for me, I was able to like apply all of this knowledge. So that was that first career and there was 3 padded rooms in that school. Like I had to
Mhm.
like hold kids down, we had to put them in padded rooms. Like it was a
Mm.
tough job. And it
Woof.
was
Oh,
nothing will make you appreciate your mental health and your life more than something like that.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because um I relate to the empathetic side and like the caretaking and the healing kind of like side, which I know you refer to, and of course you have with your Scorpio rising. Um, but like I am so deeply sensitive that like I knew about myself that there were some careers that would like I it wouldn't be healthy for me to do. Like I got to leave
Mhm.
those careers to other people. I think they're so vitally important, but like I couldn't do it day in and day out. And children with like really intense trauma or like people with a lot of sexual trauma or like people who, are in like the deepest darkest places of their life experience like a day in and day out, like those would have been the kinds of things that I feel so deeply for, but like I could not do day in and day out because that stuff's heavy. Like that's like, you know what I mean? Like that's some
Yeah.
real work happening right there.
And it is, especially as, like, I ascended in like, the more I understood the work, the more intuitive I became, right?
Mm.
Because I started tapping into my true gifts, my true abilities. And I didn't last all that long. I lasted a year because I started dreaming about these kids screaming, like
Oh
they were
God.
showing up in my dreams. I was getting really sensitive and, life told me like, "All right, that part of your journey is up, next part."
Yeah.
So that's when I got
Wow.
into the neuro space. As a neurological education specialist, I was working with kids that they couldn't move basically. They were all in wheelchairs. Like we're talking tube feedings. Some of them could eat a little bit and it was all about sensory. It was all
Hmm.
about like what you saw and with your mind and like opening up those new pathways because
Mm.
when your body is debilitated, like all your senses are heightened, all your other senses are heightened. So it was very interesting as to like the work that I did with those kids, but that also became really hard too because I remember the one thing I took away from that is like I want to be a mom one day and these parents are struggling with these kids.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, this is tough. And
Yeah.
because they can't speak, I find that I was good at the career because I could feel them.
Yeah.
So they have these really strong energies because they can't speak, and so you just have to feel and ask questions, and
Yeah.
that's how you communicate with them.
Yeah.
And, that's when I really learned the power of the mind and the power of energy and the power of, like, nonverbal communication,
Mm.
and that's healing. You can communicate through that mode, and you can heal through that mode too, and it was really interesting career for me.
Mm. Well, because I know a lot of people who listen, of course, are very interested in some of these more like intuitive gifts and all that kind of stuff. You'd
Mhm.
mentioned that like you feel like just by necessity, you like really clicked into and activated some of your own gifts doing that work. What would, or like, how do you identify like what those gifts are now? Like, what would you say some of your strongest, like intuitive or spiritual, whether you want to call them psychic or not, like kind of gifts that you sort of like what did they say through the fiery crucible, that you sort of like had
Yeah.
to master and activate really quickly. Like what does that look like for you?
Well, it's interesting because I was talking to Bella, and I know you had her on the show recently too, and she's a psychic. And I was talking to her and I'm like, I don't know that I'm fully clear on how I receive my messages, but I know I receive them and they're loud. Because
Hmm.
she's telling me about the images that she receives, right? And I know you do the
Akashic records. Yeah.
Akashic records readings and whatnot. And I'm like, I get an image that's not quite visible, but I feel it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to explain it. I do feel that most of my gifts in that came from when I was young, my environment was very unsafe, physically unsafe, emotionally unsafe, energetically unsafe. And so I had to constantly attune to what everybody else was feeling all the time. so I could survive basically.
Mhm.
And that gave me this beautiful gift, and I feel everybody and everything, and that came with
Mm.
also learning how to set energetic boundaries and emotional
Yeah.
boundaries and whatnot. But I get these messages, and I can clearly see people and where they're at in their path and what steps they need to take next. But I
Mhm.
don't see an actual visual of, like, what they need to do. I just it's really hard to explain.
Okay, so I wonder if this will be a cool way to be able to identify it then. So for people who don't know, this can be like a little lesson in psychic information. So, um, obviously we're energetic beings, all of us, very complex energetic beings, right? And like we're tapping into energies and frequencies, and our consciousness, our mind has the ability to interpret this information, right? In the same way that we have like the five senses of our physical body, smell, sight, taste, blah, 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 touch, all that kind of stuff. We also have different ways that we can receive non-physical information, aka psychic information. Um, some of these include claircognizance, which is clear knowing, clairsentience, which is clear feeling, clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, right? Like they're kind of like the psychic version of all of the like physical senses.
Mhm.
Um, so what you're describing and how I am interpreting it is claircognizance. So your primary channel of receiving psychic information is just knowing, right? It's
Yes.
like somebody like just dropped something in your brain and you understand it. Like you know it, you have a sense of it, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
It kind of sounds like you also have a little bit of clairsentience, which is clear feeling, which is means you get an emotion, maybe you have a sensation in your body and you know that it has a connection with something else. Like you understand. It usually is combined with claircognizance to be able to like understand. Because if it was just pure clairsentience, all of a sudden you would get a wave of sadness when somebody else is sad, like very, very strongly,
Mhm.
without having talked to them or them saying that they were sad. The claircognizance kind of like gives you that knowing of like, wait, did they just have something with their brother or this? You know what I mean? It's like that sort of
Mhm.
thing. The other ones, clairvoyance, it would be like a seeing, kind of like Bella's talking about getting some sort of visual. Personally, I get some of my stuff that way too. Like in the Akashic Records channeling, for example, they might show me an image of something, but it's usually paired with the other thing. So it'll be like an image, and I also just know what it means. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
like this, like, oh, I realize this symbolizes this, but this is more literal and whatever. There's clairaudience. Some people hear things as if there's like a radio in the room, and like there's like all these different ways that you can receive psychic information.
Mhm.
Um, so it feels like the claircognizance is a thing. And I was going to say this too, because it feels like this is also a thing. It sounds like you're also super telepathic, which sounds crazy because we hear telepathic and you're like, what are you talking about? Right.
Yeah.
But what I learned telepathy really is the other day, and I also identify as being super telepathic after learning this,
Mhm.
is like people send little energetic packages all the time. And usually it's under words because that's like the primary way that we connect with people is through language, through communication, right? So if you think, for example, and this is for everybody listening too, of a person saying the same word in two totally different ways, right? Saying hi, really angry, maybe, and like hi, like, hey, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you, right? Like the undertone, the little energetic package they send with that word hi could be totally different, and you would completely understand the difference without any other context, right? Like
Oh,
that in
yeah.
itself is a concept of telepathy. You could say it's nonverbal communication too. It doesn't really matter the words that you use, right? But like on an energetic level and on a telepathic level, you can actually receive much more information than they could probably explain just from like the nonverbal thing?
Mhm.
And so I know I relate to this, especially in my coaching, is people will, and even in the Akashic Records channeling, when people are trying to come up with their questions for the Akashic Records, they'll like start explaining what they're trying to be like. And I'm like, I already understand where you're coming from. Is what you're trying to say XYZ? And they'll say, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was trying to say. And I was like, I already received the telepathic message. I got it. I get it. Like we could keep moving?
You're right, right, and you're so right, like, I can feel every single vibration in every word somebody says. So,
Hmm.
that's how I know how to break things down and understand people, but I also can see, like, 8 times out of 10, 8 and a half, close to 9 times out of 10, I already know when a client starts to work with me where they're supposed to end up.
Mm,
And I can't tell them because I have to help them navigate how to get there through
yeah.
questioning and through guidance because that's their journey. But I
Yeah.
always know Almost always no. There's some clients I've been stumped because they won't let me in. And you know
Hmm.
what's interesting is because it's usually because they're either too much in their head or they're on like Adderall.
Medication.
Yes,
Yep.
I can't do it. And so it blocks the feelings, it blocks the emotions, it blocks the path. I can't see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I can almost always see where you're supposed to end up, but it's getting you as close to that with the time that we have or however much money you want to spend on coaching or time you want to spend on coaching, whatever else. So it is fascinating that you kind of are able to put that all together because I know what I do. I just
Hmm.
didn't know the words that you put to it.
Yeah. No, it sounds like you like the way that you're doing coaching is very intuitively led, right? You're using tools like, neuro and pattern and that kind of stuff, tools that really, to me, the way I conceptualize that is like those are just the parts that our science has been able to quantify and measure.
Mhm.
And like our science is much more limited than our actual capabilities of things we're able to do?
I agree.
So, like, those are the parts, like, you're using some of the parts that, like, science has been able to quantify and measure, but, like, really what you're accessing and what you're leveraging is beyond the scope of that and into intuitive types of gifts
Mhm.
and intuitively led vision of coaching with clients.
Right, right. And that's the part, like, it is part knowledge, but the other part is, yes, feeling, and this is where I'm meant to be, and this is how I'm meant to serve and help.
Yeah.
So, exactly. When you put the knowledge to it, like I said, when I started that career, I started ascending very quickly,
Yeah.
intuitively, because I'm like, ah, now I have the knowledge. Now I can put the pieces together. Now I
Yeah.
can actually, like, the more knowledge I gain, the more powerful my gifts seem to become.
100%. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I love that. And that's funny too because some people when they're like super in scarcity about things, like they might feel a little bit like competitive or like, like they want to withhold information or something to create like oh, but you have to come to me and all this kind of stuff. And when it comes to like coaching or mindset stuff, what I think is really beautiful is that like you can really what you can do is you can share as much as you know with people. You can empower them, you can give them tools to do things for themselves.
Mhm.
But part of like what's unique and which what I don't ever feel threatened about, I guess you could say, for some people who think of it that way, like I don't ever feel, or I guess the opposite way I could say it is there's something really special about working with a coach who specializes in this and does this kind of work. There's a reason they do this kind of work, and it's because they have gifts that complement you doing that personal work, that like amplify it,
Mhm.
right? So like I could give you and we could give you like the all the tools that let's just say, Lauren or I use, and you could use those and a lot of people could like get a lot of success. But there is something that's really special about working with a coach who actually has the kind of gifts to be able to maybe see something that you don't see, right? Or be able to channel in information or guidance or perspective that would be like it would be a lot harder for you to access because we have a direct line to it, and also kind of like brings that like magical fifth element sort of thing, you know, the sixth sense, I should say. That's what I mean. Like the like
Yeah.
kind of like magical sixth sense into it that can take just the tools that maybe might be a little bit um sometimes confusing to use or where you might feel some resistance. And like especially when they're intuitively guided, which I think customizes the whole experience, like really helps just click everything into place. Like it helps align it and it helps you finally go, ah, that's what it is. You know what I mean?
Totally. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all of the tools and techniques I use are like the in between. And it's like I said, I know where you're supposed to go after one conversation, maybe two. I know exactly where you're meant to go. You don't see it yet. I know where you're going to be and who you're going to be and how you're going to end up. I see it
Hmm.
visually. But between there is like that's where all the tools and all the practice and all of the things I learned come into play, which is like breaking of the patterns. What's in your way? Let's see it. Let's understand it. Let's break them away so you can get closer and closer and closer to that goal because
Yeah.
I can see it, but I can't do it for you. And if I tell you, it's just like it's not going to click until you're ready anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of sounds like too, like the vision of what you get is not even so much for them. It's for you so that you have guidance on how to help them,
I've got a
you know?
whole map in my head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've
And,
got a
and
whole
again, it's
map.
not even like for the whole point of like them knowing it, because that wouldn't be what helps them. What helps them is you being really clear on how to help them. So
Right.
like the whole purpose is really just for you, for you to help them, but like it's really for you. And I think that that's really cool.
Yeah. It is. It's very helpful.
Oh
especially
my
when you know how to
goodness.
use it.
There you go.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm really excited for us to get into what will be like the main topic, which is what does that mean to break patterns and, how can we start to find our limiting beliefs? But before we transition into that, I just want to open up the floor or like, I guess, give the opportunity if there's anything else that um, wanted to share about the work that you do or about the perspective that you have, or even maybe what you love most about it, like kind of just give you an opportunity to um, speak to whatever it is that you want to just about like the work that you do in your story before we get into all the juicy stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and so, I mean, I come from the belief that we're all here for a purpose, like, we're all here and we're meant to serve in a certain or a particular manner, and I think the path can look differently, and I think it can shift depending on the decisions that you make, but really, like, I love this work because I get to watch people's lives change before my eyes, like, people are happier than they have ever experienced before. They're actually experiencing purposeful living for the first time in their lives. They're actually allowing themselves to feel happiness and joy for the first time in their lives because they grew up in suffering and didn't know anything else. Like, I gotta say, like, that's the most rewarding part of this work, and I'm sure you can
Mhm.
resonate as a coach or it's just like you get to watch people's lives change and you get to know that you're sending people back out there as better humans in the world to make this energy of this whole world a better place. And like that's just my mission.
Mm.
That's how strongly and passionately I feel about this. Like I of course like make a living off of this work and feel that I deserve that as well, but income doesn't come in the only form of money, like, my income is also, like, the energy in the world I get to live in, and
Mm.
just having an impact on a small corner of the world makes me so very happy.
Oh
So, I
my
do
gosh, I
believe
love
that
that.
yeah, I do believe that breaking patterns is one way to really free yourself from old, like, limiting beliefs and emotions and feelings and behaviors that you just can't seem to get a hold of.
Mm. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know for me, like what I told people I did a discover your soul purpose like little webinar event, and one of the things that I said on there, and I think I've said in other podcasts too, is that like whatever feels so important to you uniquely that needs to be done in the world, like it just feels important for whatever reason, right? Everybody has their own version of what they think that is. Like that is a sign, that is a inkling about like what you should move towards. And obviously you and I have a lot in common in that with the kind of work that we do. But I know for me, I had always felt like to change the world, you have to change yourself, you know? Like
Mhm.
to heal the world, you have to heal yourself. Like you gotta look in the mirror, and the best way you can help the world is by creating all the things that you want in the world in yourself, like very powerfully, and committing to that changed my life. And I was like, for the other people who feel this way, who really want to change, heal, empower themselves, like this is the way that we change the world is by assisting people to do this within themselves. Like that is truly where change happens. And that to me feels like one of the most important things that we could possibly do for the world, is like attend to our own
Right.
BS, and our stuff and find like our joy and our love and our peace. And so that was the kind of work that I knew that I wanted to do with people. So I resonate with what you said 100%. All right, everyone. So let's get into the goods. We're going to be talking about breaking patterns and finding your limiting beliefs. Lauren and I were talking ahead of this episode, trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about because we could talk about many things, which hopefully means we'll do more than just this one episode together. But one of the things that we both felt really excited about was discussing from our perspective what it really means to break patterns and how you can find limiting beliefs. Because a lot of times when we work with clients, like they've just never done that process before, so they just don't know how, or maybe they've never even really been introduced to the concept and like why that concept plays such a big role that it does in people's experiences and creating the kinds of experiences that they want. So for the sake of just sharing that part of our knowledge and our experience and our expertise about like what that looks like so that you, if it's the first time you're hearing it, great. if you're trying to figure out how to implement that in your life, you're getting a little bit more guidance. We just felt like this could be something that would be very impactful for everybody. And who better to talk about this with than than Lauren, who's an expert in all things patterns and limiting beliefs. I feel like we should start with the patterns part of it.
Mhm.
And I kind of feel like first step, very, very first step is like having the kind of awareness about what your patterns even are and
Yes.
like the
Like
self-awareness and the self-honesty about what's really going on so that you can like identify exactly what patterns aren't working for you or out of alignment. That to me feels like a very natural kind of like starting point. But I'll let you take the floor, Lauren. Like when you're
Mhm.
thinking about, kind of the first steps in this process, if we did create something that was linear, which of course healing isn't linear, but just for the sake of ease and digestion
Right.
for everybody listening, like how would you start?
Well, I think it's really important to preface this topic with the fact that, like, however you're living your life right now, if there are aspects to your behavior or to your thinking that you do not enjoy and you do not like, you do not have to live like that. Like some people just think like, "Ah, I just can't give up sugar, like, it just is what it is, right? I can't stop eating those cookies at night," or, "Oh, I just can't, stop thinking about my ex or all of my exes or ruminating over, like, exes. It just is what it is. I'll just have to deal with it," right? Or, "I just can't stop procrastinating," or, "I just can't stop doing this or that." Like, you do not have to accept any behavior, any mental pattern. Like, as I was saying, like, when I was a neurological education specialist, like, that's what I learned, like, the mind has all of these new pathways, and you get to create the life that you wanna live
Mhm,
through just creating those new pathways. You get to decide who you wanna be and how you wanna live. You do not have to fall victim to anything. You do not have to let your mind control you, you have to control your mind, right?
mhm, mhm,
And to know that you're in a pattern, typically, it's a behavior or a mental pattern or a thinking pattern that you can't stop,
mhm.
right? I can't stop
Compulsory
it.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, I can't stop. I keep trying. I've tried all of these different things. Like I've tried the habit breaking cycle. I've tried all of these different modes, but I can't seem to stop. And that is because that habit or that mental pattern has roots.
Mhm,
There's trauma attached to it. There's a reason that you're doing it, and it's because of your limiting belief.
mhm,
So when we look at a pattern, it does start with a limiting belief. This limiting belief is usually derived from childhood, maybe an experience outside of childhood, but typically starts there because then that creates even more traumatic events throughout your life
it all
until you
piles
break them.
on. Yeah.
Yes, because life is constantly reflecting what it wants you to solve and, heal from until you do. So typically it's derived from childhood, this limiting belief. And we're just going to say, like, I'm not enough is the limiting belief, right?
Mhm,
And that's because maybe one of your caregivers, every time that you wanted to like speak up or speak up on your opinion, they're like, I don't have time for that, whatever else. Right. And because you felt so rejected from that experience, your mind takes on this limiting belief, I'm not enough. And then it creates a fear. To ever feel those feelings again, the fear becomes fearing rejection. Right. And then from that fear has to come some type of behavior to protect you in the outside world from ever being able to feel those feelings again, right? So the fear is rejection, and it probably takes on some type of behavior, let's say, um, people pleasing, right? So you
mhm.
people please all the time and you act all the ways that everybody wants you to so that you never get rejected and you never have to feel those feelings of I'm not enough.
Mhm.
But from people pleasing, you get this undesired outcome. This undesired outcome is probably unappreciated. So I isolate or whatever it is. And that just confirms your limiting belief. I'm
Mhm.
not enough because somebody didn't appreciate me because I people pleased and I wasn't myself. Right.
Mhm.
So you can see where that cycle starts and ends, starts and ends. Well, it doesn't end, it just keeps on going.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And you're constantly confirming your limiting belief.
Yep.
Right. So anything that you just can't stop doing, if you can't stop people pleasing, if you can't stop doing those behaviors or thought patterns, that is part of that pattern. So you just fill in, all of those blanks with that cycle and you try to figure out, okay, what is my pattern? How do I break it?
Yeah. And I think that is very illuminating if nobody's ever been introduced to this concept before, right? That your most common, maybe, but like emotional feelings that you experience in your life and the behaviors that you're most often eliciting are connected to energy, aka emotion, which is again traumatic experiences.
Mhm.
And they're all deeply connected to that. And I love what you said too about if you've already made an effort to try to change said behavior or try to change the thought pattern and you can't, it's because it's rooted into something real deep and real strong within your psyche, your memory, your body. How, like I would say it in some of these woo-woo terms, right? Is that there's still a lot of energy that's like still in your body, like it's still active in your body, right? And it stays active in your body because it still feels true. It hasn't been like expressed and released, right? So it just keeps generating and it's very, very strong, right?
Right.
Like, it's in some of the work that I do with people is like, let's just say, you know, we uncovered a limiting belief. We didn't even realize we were thinking this about ourselves. Let's just say we do we are able to start reprogramming it, right? Like it oftentimes does take actually feeling, emoting, tapping into that energy of the previous belief and like really letting it go from the body even before it feels like you have a little bit of like more space and it has a little bit less of a grip on you to be able to like start to do something new, just because of like the energetics of how that all plays out, including the neural pathway stuff, which I love. I know one of the things that I think I learned the most about that. I'm doing EFT tapping and learning about like
Oh,
releasing
yeah.
some of like the charge on neural pathways so that you can create new ones. It's just like it's a
Mhm.
fascinating thing. So on that note, I would be curious, like, how do you explain it maybe to clients or to people like that concept of very strong neural pathways and how to and like what's really happening when you're trying to build new patterns, being informed about how that plays into everything.
Right. Well, because your brain's main job is to keep you safe at all times, it it's going to always go back to what is comfortable. What have you already experienced, right? And if you've been in that place, that is your comfort zone to people please and to feel like you're not worthy or you're not enough, you're going to stay there until you
Mhm,
start sending your brain new messages, right? And so what's going on in your mind is like confusion, really. I want a different outcome. I want something different, but I keep doing the same thing. Why do I keep doing that? And it's because your brain is taking over and it's like, it's safe here. We know what's going to happen. We can already predict the future, right?
mhm,
We already know if say if you're stuck in a toxic cycle of like choosing negative partners, right? Or like toxic partners or something and you're like ruminating on those exes or something like that, right? The limiting belief might be like I'm not worthy of healthy love, right? And the fear is abandonment. And then the behavior is codependency or something along that line, then choosing a toxic partner. And then you just keep on confirming your belief and you're always trying to protect yourself from being abandoned. But meanwhile, you're abandoning yourself in the process,
yeah,
but you're comfortable there. Like, that's what's going to happen. Like, I already
familiar.
predicted the
Yeah.
future. Yes, I'm in control. Your brain's like, I'm in control. We already know what's going to happen. The scary part is creating a new outcome because it's like, we don't really know what's going to happen there. And it also takes being vulnerable,
Mhm,
right? And so when you start to go from a limiting belief to an empowered belief, that's when the affirmations come in, right? But affirmations
mhm.
alone, they can't do anything, right? No, I mean, I'm not going to say they can't do anything, but they can't do much.
They're meant to be
So
paired with other things.
they need to be paired, right? And so you move over to an empowered belief. What do I want to believe about myself? Okay, that's my goal, right? How do I start to heal that limiting belief? Like, where are those roots? Like, let me heal that experience. And that's when you work with somebody like a coach or you work with therapists or you get mentors, people who can really help you in that process. And you
Mhm,
go through your deep night of the soul and you go through that experience and you have that and you learn to heal. Okay, this is where that limiting belief came from. Like, how do I now tell my mind that that's no longer true? And I come up with a new empowered belief and I have that new goal. Okay, now that I know that that's not true, now we can talk to the fear. Now we're talking to our mind. Okay, listen, thank you for protecting me for so long, but this is not needed anymore. I'm an adult and I have more control now, and I have all these skills and all this healing knowledge. And now I can learn to manage my fear and rewire my mindset. This is when you do use those tapping techniques. This is when you say, like, this is not true anymore. Like, rejection is actually direction. Failure is actually a lesson. Whatever the things come up, you actually tell your mind, like, it's okay. We're going to
Mhm.
be okay.
Mhm.
Because we know how to manage our emotions now. When we were kids and we were living under somebody else's roof, like, we didn't have any control.
Yep.
And we relied on other people to heal and fix our emotional distraughtness. Now we're adults and we could do that ourselves. So we need to reteach our mind, like, hey, we're here now, we're adults now, and we get to teach our mind, like, we are okay. We can deal with these things. But it
Mhm.
seems so daunting because we never could before. We always had to
Yeah.
latch on to other people. So then we get to the behavior. This is the most important part because if your behavior is people pleasing, you need to learn to say no. And when you do say no, when you do take a different action, different behavior, that action is what finally sends your brain a message like, oh, we're safe here. Oh, we're creating a new safe zone for us. Like, oh, this is now new reality. Every time you people please, you send yourself a message like, I'm not good enough. Every time you people please, you send yourself a message like, my needs are important. Every time you ate the cookie when you didn't want to eat the cookie, it just sends your brain a message like, I'm not worthy of good health, right? Whatever it is that you're stuck in, you've got to know how your actions send your brain a message that is just so powerful.
Mhm.
And you've got to ask yourself, what messages do you want to send your mind? When I
Mhm.
say no, when I don't want to do something, I just sent my brain a message like, my needs are important and I love myself.
Mhm.
And that's when you start creating a new pattern because then you get a new outcome. And now this is the last and final step. And this is where I get stuck, right? You have to learn to allow the new desired outcome because your life's going to change now, right? And when you stop fearing rejection or you stop fearing whatever it is you fear and you change your behavior, now you have to allow the good things to happen. And if you have a fear of abandonment or whatever else, it's like, oh my gosh, what if I have good things and then the other shoe drops eventually? Right. That's when all those thoughts start to come up. But you have to learn to allow this new, good, great outcome to come and know that you might fall backwards, but now you know how to pick yourself back up because this isn't uncharted territory anymore. You can be here. You can do this. Right.
Mhm.
So allowing and receiving is that last step and allowing yourself to merge into that new space and really change your life. And people get stuck there. They're like, I don't know that I'm ready. I'm so familiar with the other side,
Mhm.
the dark side of my life. Like, I don't know that I'm ready to step into my light. That
Mhm.
means I'm going to have to keep doing that stuff, right? I'm going to have to
Yeah.
keep doing it. I'm going to have to keep growing. I'm going to have to, like, just like anybody, like, oh, I can finally have a healthy relationship. And they're 1 foot in and they're like, do I take my next step in there? Because that means constant work. That means I'm going to have to work on that relationship every day to maintain that healthy relationship. I'm going to have to be loved. I'm going to have to give love all the time. Oh my gosh. Right.
Sounds like you kind of start back over with the limiting and fear work because that just brings up
Mhm.
perhaps a new fear, right? Because that's where a
Right.
lot of resistance comes from. So if like we get to the point where we want to allow and receive the new outcome, like that might mean meeting a new fear in ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, this stuff never ends. We know this. It's healing. It's healing work.
Mhm.
And the whole point is to break patterns so we can live a better life. And it's just going to become common nature. When it
Yeah,
comes
it
up, it's
gets
like,
easier.
yeah, yeah. It's like, I know how to do this. Like
Mm,
now I can say I break patterns all the time in my life, but I can say I'm not sitting here ruminating and upset and anxious and depressed about where my life is at because I know I have a solution if anything were to come up and I trust myself now because I
mm,
have the tools that I need.
mm.
And being a mindset coach helps a lot because I've got all of these tools. People ask me that all the time. Like, yes, it helps a ton
Yeah,
because the more I help myself, the more I can help others.
yeah.
But it doesn't end, it just gets easier and your life just gets better because we're always I don't know what else we'd be doing on this earth unless we were growing and
Mm,
becoming better and better.
I love that. What would be some of the things that you think are really important for people to do or like clients to do if they're meeting resistance at some of those points? And I have some things that like I recommend for clients, but I would really love to hear what you think, especially around um, so it's some of those different steps. It's like limiting beliefs, it's addressing the fears. It's like actively choosing even new thoughts. It kind of sounds like in response to the fears and creating new behaviors, right? So,
Yeah.
like if there are different points where maybe like acting out a new behavior is extremely difficult, right? Or even like trying to like really believe and be in the new thoughts, right? Like what are
Mhm.
some of the like sort of practical things that can really help people in that process if they're meeting a lot of resistance.
So if we go down the list, I could probably think of a client for each one that's going through a resistance in each one. When it comes to healing, I mean, that's the most important part. We know that when it comes down to doing anything in life, it's like you've got to heal. And I know
Mhm,
that a lot of people are resistant to seeing their weakness and resistant to seeing their dark parts because it's like it's
mhm.
hard. It's hard to admit you're not perfect. It's hard to admit that you've got problems, you've got issues, you've got things you've got to work on. And it's like, and it's also hard because a lot of people are embarrassed by their past.
Mm. Shame.
It's a real shame. And the best thing you can do in that time, I mean, is surround yourself with other people who are doing the same thing. You
Mhm.
need community right now. You are healing. You are getting ready to dive deep and you need to be around other like-minded people so that you
Yeah.
don't get shamed for going to that place and you don't look at other people and wonder like, I don't belong.
Mm.
Right? You need to get around people you can have these conversations with because it's a ride of your life.
And how would you describe to people, um, and like I just like I'm curious what your answer is. Of course, I could think of one too, but like when you say you come to that limiting belief, you recognize some of those experiences that informed that belief, right? Where there's still that emotional charge or that fear, that hurt, whatever it is. And it's time to do healing with that. Like, what are some examples of what that looks like? Because I know that there are going to be some people listening that are like, I don't even know where to start with that kind of thing. Like, what does that even look like? Like what does it even really mean to like meet the like deepest, darkest of my fears and of these beliefs
Yeah.
and heal that? I'm curious. So would like your what like how would you describe what that could look like for people?
Well, what that could look like for people is just like it's like an awakening. I know for myself, I remember the first time I realized like I really needed to heal, I did a Reiki session and I was like, actually, I didn't know why I needed it. I just said, okay, I'll do it.
Hmm.
And I woke up and I was like, I woke up crying and I hadn't cried for like years before that. I was like really blocked up. And I just woke up crying like I just need love. And it was all ongoing from there. You're talking dreams were coming up. You're talking like thoughts were coming up, memories were coming up, and you're just like, oh gosh. And it's hard because you're going to want to avoid all of those thoughts and you're going to want to not finish the dream, right? You're going to want to
Yeah.
not go there. But my suggestion to you is like, step into it. Like, once you see something, you can't unsee it and go find answers.
Hmm.
Go find answers and understand like that your past definitely left a dent on how you feel about yourself
Yeah.
and figure that out for yourself, but also realize that that's no longer that doesn't have to be your reality anymore. And you
Hmm.
get there, but first I do think you need to face it. Like I think you have to really accept the past for what it is. I think that's a big part of healing. Really just
Hmm.
accepting it. Like this is what happened, this is how I felt and it sucked.
Yeah. How I would like approach this and how I work with my clients or what I would offer to people who are thinking about this. Um, I agree with everything you said. You got to meet yourself. You've got to face it. And even what you said, like I need love. I think that was actually very profound.
Mm,
And like keep finding answers, you know? This is how I work with clients. We do like specific kinds of like kind of like guided visualizations a lot of times. And because like I really, really love including the spiritual and like the woo-woo and stuff, like we're inviting all of the things that make you feel really safe. We're inviting the angels, Maybe it's your ancestors, maybe it's loved ones, like people that create a sense of like safety, especially emotional safety. We invite your higher self too. And then we start to invite the versions of yourself that hold this pain and hold these beliefs that you're very ashamed of and you've been avoiding. And it's really this process of starting to meet yourself again. Because what I find is exactly like you said, we avoid these parts of ourselves, one, because we don't know what to do with them, right? Like we don't know how to stay in pain and not do a bunch of funky stuff, right? Like we don't know how to self-soothe, and we're afraid that the pain is confirming our worst fears. And because we're afraid those fears are true, we just never face it, right? So what I like how I might describe what a healing process could look like, and again, like we've both said, get help with these things too for the first couple times because like you really want to make sure what you're doing is you're creating safety in meeting these things and injecting a lot of love and like wisdom into old stuff, right? And that can take some support to do that. Meeting these old parts of yourself, seeing and meeting the pain with compassion and love, and then after you've given some full TLC love and attention, they finally are seen, they're finally heard, they're finally accepted. Another very profound thing that Lauren said, because a lot of times we hold on to things in our resistance to just like accept that it was the way that it was. Like we're
Mm,
so afraid to grieve it. We're so afraid to just let it be that we fight with it in the form of being mad and this and that and the other thing, right? And that doesn't help us release and really heal. Like accept these parts of ourselves, accept what happened. And then what I really like to do, and I invite people to do this as well, is when you're in that space, when you feel like you've like been able to see and feel, I guide people to turn to their higher self and ask, okay, what's the truth about what really happened here?
mhm,
Because when we're children, like the mental and emotional, literally capacity of our body, like of our cognitive ability to process events is extremely different than it is when we're adults, right? Like
right.
how we interpret things a million times different. And not because we're bad or we're doing something wrong, but just it's inherent, like where
Mhm,
we're at, like the complexity at which we can handle and the nuance we can sense, very different. So being able to feel like you have the tools, you have the safety, you have the bravery to face some of these parts that you feel really scared of and that holds a lot of pain just be in so much love with these parts of yourself and then to be able to turn and I like it to be their own higher selves. I don't need it to come from me and like letting it come from the wisdom in you. Like what was the truth of what really happened here? Is this belief that this child self picked up, is that really true? Let your own higher self tell you, you know? Okay, if that's not true, then what is true? Let your higher
right.
self tell you. And
Mhm,
what is it that how can like you move forward? And again, see what your higher self says. And I just think it's such a beautiful moment of including the wisdom of your soul and your spirit and like what you already know. Again, like I think it's so empowering when like you can know that the answers come from you. It can really build that self-trust, right? And like you can walk away from that. Like I've like some of my clients have had some of the most profound experiences being able to like realize that meeting their pain didn't generate more pain, right? It didn't create more darkness and shadow. In fact, it made them feel more love than they've ever felt in their life to be able to meet those parts of themselves in a way that was supportive. You know what I mean?
mhm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Totally. And if I can give one tangible exercise that people can do that I've also used with my clients is making a list of like what you didn't receive as a child that you needed.
Mm,
Looking at that list and asking yourself in every way, how can I give that to myself now?
mm,
Accept it. Okay, I didn't get it. I needed it. Really needed it. That's where my
mm,
pain's coming from. I
mhm,
needed security. I needed safety. Now I don't feel safe. How can you give yourself safety now? Right?
mm.
And it just brings further awareness to the situation because the more conscious you become, the more you're going to be able to manage this stuff.
100%.
Mm.
Yeah, that's one of the people that I really love, Teal Swan. You can like search almost any topic on YouTube and she's got some sort of video on it and she has really cool like
Uh-huh.
insights on things. And one of the things that she talks about is being aware of your needs and claiming your needs. Like that's one of the most important things that we can be conscious of. Um, and she recommends the exact same thing. I was literally just watching a video on this 2 days ago. So that's so crazy and such a synchronicity that you say that because she was like, yes, like write what your needs are. And if you don't even know what your needs are, like go look up Google a list of like emotional needs, physical needs, mental
Mhm.
needs, and like use that list as like an inventory of like what is it, you know what I mean? Because when we can start to be conscious and directly ask for our needs to get met, it makes all of those like covert ways that we're trying to get our needs met and some of these sort of like more manipulative ways that our mind and our subconscious mind has to use because we feel like we can't ask directly for whatever reason, it makes those unnecessary. And really, people pleasing is like a covert way of trying to get a need of being accepted met, right?
Mhm.
So I think that that's a wonderful tangible as you start to move into sort of like reprogramming behaviors, right? And creating new strategies for like getting needs met, right? To like actually have visibility of like, what am I really trying to accomplish with this behavior here? Like, not on the surface level, but like deeper than that. Like, what am I really trying to accomplish? And yes, doing like an inventory is incredibly helpful. I'm a list galley. I'm a list girl for everything.
We love lists.
We love lists. So yes, I absolutely recommend that. Oh, there was one other thing. Let me see my guides. What was the other thing that you wanted me to say on all this? It was they're saying it's later in the process. So it was the healing, like, well, I guess finding your limiting beliefs, right? And
Mhm.
starting to do healing work with that.
Yep.
Acknowledging okay.
Next was the fear, then behavior,
Mhm.
then undesired outcome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. They're like showing me it was kind of these two other things.
Mhm.
So in the way that I approach some of these things in this process that Lauren has so wonderfully and incredibly outlined for us is when we're working with the fears and also when we're starting to build new pathways with new experiences. Um, one of the things that just in like a spiritual woo-woo way, and then really, I guess this is true for other things, is of course, we got to be really careful when we're making decisions based on fears. Like, I think it's a generally accepted thing that making decisions based on fears does not, nothing returns to you that feels real good when the underlying motivation behind things is fear, because really your intention behind things is always returned back to you, right? And oftentimes, like Lauren explained, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like if your behavior is educated by your fear, the outcome is going to be confirming your fear, right? Like you're just going to get it spit
Yep.
right back at you, you
Yeah.
know?
Every time.
So and this is something that I've been using from actually Gabby Bernstein's book, The Universe Had Your Back, which is a really, really cool book too. She says that when she's in a moment where she recognizes and she has a little bit of that self-awareness that she's feeling the urge, right, to act from a place of fear, she's feeling fear a lot in her body, she'll say out loud, guides, God, source, whatever you want to use to like call, your higher self, your higher power, whatever it is. I recognize that I want to act from a place of fear right now. Like I recognize the fear in myself and that it's feeling like it's really wanting to create from that space. And right now I choose love. I choose
Mm.
love.
Mhm.
I choose to act from a place of love. So help show me the options if they're ones that you're not sure of, right? Of how I can act with love and help me move forward in a situation in love. Even just like consciously saying, I'm stepping out of this sandbox of fear
Mhm.
and I want to be in the energy of love. Like the energy of love is so potent, especially in like a healing balm over some of this stuff. Oh, that was the other thing. Thank you so much, kids. And here's big, 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 big thing that I will preach until the cows come home. Lauren is so like wonderfully described how the brain and the body are working to keep you safe. And when it becomes very, very hard to sort of override the safety coping mechanisms, is when your body feels like its safety is actually in jeopardy, aka your nervous system is dysregulated,
Mhm.
aka you're in fight or flight. So this is what they would want me to say and to remind us is that when you are starting to build new patterns, you have to keep your nervous system regulated and signal to your body that you're safe now. You will meet so much more resistance than you need to meet, than you have to meet. And frankly, you're probably not going to get a lot of results. If you're trying to break a pattern and you're not attending to, does your body physiologically feel like it is safe?
Mm-hmm.
They've done so many studies about how your physiology is extremely different when you're in a parasympathetic nervous system state versus when you're in a sympathetic nervous state. Sympathetic being fight or flight, freeze, fawn, stress response.
Mm-hmm.
Parasympathetic being rest and digest. Your cognitive function is different when your nervous system is dysregulated. Your ability to build new pathways, your ability to learn new information, your ability to socialize with people. It is, they've literally measured, shown it, studied it. It like those parts of your brain don't get as much blood flow. Like they're
Right.
turned off, they're offline, you know? So that's the other thing that I like very strongly recommend to people when you're in that healing process and you're like actually creating that intention and you're starting to get those reps in with like new stuff. If you're feeling like you just can't bring yourself to do something new, it's probably because you are dysregulated in your nervous system. So learning some of those practical tools of breath work, of like some of the stuff you can do with your vagal nerve, like vagal nerve massage in your ear, right? Even things like humming and singing, certain types of exercise are really good. Other types of meditating, like there are so many things that you can do to intentionally regulate your nervous system. From my perspective, that is like a non-negotiable,
Mm-hmm.
like it is like a crucial part
Right.
of when you get to that point of the process,
Mm-hmm.
trying to um trying to program some new patterns. Is that something that you also work with a lot of clients on, is like integrating very conscious and like often nervous system regulation sort of techniques as they're reprogramming?
Yeah, well, that really happens when we get into the fear and we create the new relationships with the fear. Because if your mind is deeming like failure as this really bad thing, your nervous system is going to act up, right? But
Yeah.
it's like if we then can have a new relationship with it,
Hmm.
it's going to feel very different, right? So that kind of happens in your mind so you can then bring it into your body. It's like let's create these new relationships with these fears. Let's
Hmm.
talk about rejection and what benefits it can bring to your life and how we can start to have a good relationship with that. How about abandonment? When the wrong people leave, it's a good thing.
Hmm.
When you're rejected, it gives you direction. When you failed, it gives you a lesson. So one thing when it comes to like as we move down the line when it comes to the fear
Hmm.
is, have those conversations with fear and start to have a new relationship with fear. And a fair amount of people will resist at this point because it's like they're just so used to living in that place, right?
Hmm.
Mentally. This is a rewiring shift.
Hmm.
And this is where it takes conscious, constant tapping. I'm
Hmm.
telling you, like, it's exhausting. I'm not going to
Hmm.
lie to you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, oh, it's easy to always remember to tap your mind whenever like you think failure is a bad thing, right? Or whenever you think like, um, my ex was the only person I could get, or whenever you think like I'll never be good enough or whatever, like tapping and consciously rewiring those thoughts all the time. And when you do that around the fear, first you probably want to write a letter to your fear as if it were a person. How can we
Hmm.
create this new relationship? Like write a letter. I'm really upset with you. This is what's gone on because
Hmm.
of you. Now I would like to have this relationship with you
Hmm.
and talk to it. And when you can keep tapping and you can keep reminding yourself every time it comes up, like, oh, what if they leave? Oh, what if they do?
Hmm.
It's going to be okay because the right people will always stay or come back at the right time. And
Hmm.
you've got to remember that and have that trust within the universe and within God, really,
Hmm.
when it comes down to it. And so the fear part is where people can get stuck because it's like,
It
nobody
runs deep.
likes to consciously, well, nobody likes to sit there and consciously like I'm in a phase of it right now for myself, having been going through a breakup. It's like I have to constantly take myself out of the lack mindset and see what my future holds because life took somebody out of my life for a reason. What does my
Hmm.
future hold? But I keep wanting to go back and find out, okay, what did I do wrong? No,
Hmm.
nope. The right things
Yeah.
are going to find me. Like, sure, I can reflect on what I could have maybe learned or done, done differently or whatever else.
Yeah.
But we want to think in terms of that more abundant mindset.
Yeah.
And the fear is always like, I'm going to be abandoned because I'm not good enough. Right.
Yeah.
And so I've got to get rid of those thoughts and move into that place. And I'm in a place where I'm constantly rewiring and I'm like, gosh, I forgot what I put my clients through.
Well, and I love this too because like how I might describe this is it sounds like it's kind of like a top-down approach, right? Like it's like your thoughts generate your physical experience. They generate the energy that you're feeling in your body.
Mhm.
So if you stay really diligent, not only in just thinking the thoughts, but really trying to feel like what the energy would be underneath those thoughts, you can influence like the physiology, the feeling, the emotion in your body, right? So,
Mhm.
like being able to be really diligent and disciplined about repeating these thoughts and like meeting a negative thought. Okay, but like, what are these things that soothe us on a mental level so that our body can feel soothed again, right? And
Yes.
pairing it with the EFT tapping is great too because that's tapping into the energy meridians on your body and it's like releasing again some of the charge that's on those things that makes it a little
Mhm.
bit easier um to let go of them and move on from them, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and yeah, I guess the only other thing I would offer in that place is like sometimes you can do bottom up too, where you can like actually notice if your body is in that place, you're feeling a little tense. And honestly, most people when they have not been super conscious of this work before are spending the majority of their time in a stress response. Like that's just like what is normal now, unfortunately. So to be told, like most people could spend a lot of time throughout their day doing regulation techniques and maybe even doing the mindset stuff after they've regulated their body from the bottom up and seeing how if that experience feels a little different,
Mhm.
right? Because they're both trying to accomplish the same thing of creating safety paired with a new experience or a new belief, right? So
Right.
that your mind and your body can start to associate safety with this new thing as opposed to
Mhm.
it being dangerous and therefore you need to be afraid, you know? So
Right.
I think that that's absolutely fascinating. The last thing that I wanted to circle back to with this process that you described is like those behaviors and then starting to let yourself receive. Um, one of the things that I saw the other day, and this is absolutely in line with what I hear from my guides that I tap into when I'm doing coaching sessions with people, or even the Akashic records, and it was so cool. And I wish I had the statistic. I don't know if I bookmarked it to be able to find it, but I'm paraphrasing what it said, that there were studies done about building new neural pathways, new behaviors, new ideas, that it takes approximately somewhere around like 250 or 300 repetitions to build a new strong neural pathway, a lot of repetitions, right?
Mm.
But when you're building a new neural pathway paired with the feeling of joy and fun, you can build just as strong of a new neural pathway with 25 or 30 repetitions. And that like blew my mind. But again, it
Wow.
also felt so true for what the guides are telling me all the time. Like, yes, safety is like the foundation, the number one cornerstone. But like when you can add in an energy of joy and fun into
Mhm.
that process,
Mhm.
the way that it amplifies, the way that it like takes the energy and transmutes it like bam, like roof off the house like sort of level is 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 crazy.
Right.
Um on like a woo-woo spiritual place, it feels like that energy of joy creates the most open flow. So when we talk about accepting and letting things flow, like joy puts us in the most open, flowing, surrender sort of energy, as well as this sort of like optimism and trust that's also involved with joy, right?
Mm.
And it's like this very powerful vibration of energy that helps you be like the most receptive and at the closest connection point with all of the good things that people are trying to bring into their lives, abundance, bliss, love, whatever.
Mm.
Like it makes you like the most um like energetically attractive almost to like those sorts of energies, which is why it is such a powerful feeling, like emotional feeling to exist in. So anyway, I wonder what your thoughts are on that and like maybe any other little pointers that you have for people like when they're getting to that place and they're doing the work, they're doing the things, they're doing the new behaviors and they're really
Mhm.
trying to like anchor in the new patterns into their life.
Right. Well, I want to also speak on what you just said. And can you say the statistic again when you come from happiness and
Yeah.
joy? Yeah.
Yeah, it was 10% versus the 100%. So it was like 250 or 300 repetitions,
Mhm.
just like in a normal, like serious,
Right.
concentrated, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was like 25 or 30 with fun when you were
Yeah.
doing it in the energy of fun.
And I want to speak to this because it's really important to notice that you have to come from a place of true joy and true happiness, because there is a point where people start to try to manipulate their own mind and pretend like they're in a state of joy when they really need to heal, or they really need to face some of their issues, right?
Hmm.
And some people pretend to be in a state of happiness all the time, pretend to be in a state of joy, pretend like everything's perfect all the time. And what I've noticed from the work that I do, that that can start to create kind of like a sociopathic type of thinking, almost like a narcissistic type of view of life, because it's like when you avoid all of the hard stuff and you beeline it straight to like, I'm good, I'm happy all the time, everything is great. It's just like you are not really like, everything inside is all conjumbled and your mind is extremely confused and you're putting on like this performance or this act. So I'm happy that you brought it up, because when you do come from a place of like pure joy, true happiness, because you've made that decision and you said like, oh, I'm gonna work through my stuff. Like I'm willing to see the dark parts of myself. I know I'm not perfect. Like I know that this is where I can go, and I'm
Hmm.
so happy I found somebody to help me, or these tools or these resources. That's coming from true joy and true positivity. But when
Yeah.
you're avoiding the dark stuff and you're just like, yeah, I'm choosing joy, I'm choosing happiness. That's a scary place to be. And I just want to warn anybody for that. Like that's a very scary mindset, because you can get stuck there and nobody can really help you when you're there, because you're
Yeah.
living in this non-reality type of world.
Yeah. And I'll just say for my part, like that, what you described is spiritual bypassing. That's what I would
Yes.
describe that, right? Um, and I think what's really tricky about that from the line of work that I'm in is that you can get really sick doing that. Like
Yeah.
really, really sick because the energies in your body, you're not attending to them and they do not go away. And if that's the kind of strategy you're using to cope, you're still accumulating that energy of shame and fear and pain and sadness that was there to begin with, but you're repressing it and your body is forced to hold it for you because you're not engaging in the strategies to let it flow through
Hmm.
you, which also involves flowing out of you. And like
Yeah.
you will literally get sick. Like your body, your health will reflect your inability and your determination to
Hmm.
not tap into the truth of what's going on. And I don't say that
Right.
as like a fear tactic for anybody because I don't believe again in doing things like from a fear motivated place, but the reality is that there will be um there will be an impact to that sort of path. And I
Mhm.
think what's really beautiful about, you know, adventuring and trying one of these processes where you're really attending to the truth of how you feel and your experiences is that you're kind of like letting love clear the space for you, clear the
Mm.
street, clear the way, right? And you're letting joy lead you. Joy is a signal of where you have authenticity. And for me, the way I love to talk about it is like, what does your most authentic life look like? Because that's going to be different for you than it is somebody else. There's not
Mhm.
this like caricature of a good, healthy, fulfilled life. Like it's going to be unique to you. So, like, how can you just connect with your authenticity and follow that? Because that's what's going to be innately joyful to you. And the joy is the signal that you're doing something that so deeply feels true and good for you, you
Yeah.
know? And
Mhm.
like that's the kind of stuff where I feel like our souls are always trying to get to exactly what you said earlier. Like I
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
that's what we're programmed, like a magnet trying to get towards.
Mhm.
So when you learn about processes like this that are available to help you get there, to give you some sort of tool or like way to face and deal with and process those parts of yourself that like they're so big and scary. I don't even know how to meet them or do them.
Right.
I don't even know how to get from place A to point B, like knowing that there are these kinds of things out there, that there are people that specialize in helping people start to learn how to do this process so you can actually get to point B in a very authentic and true way. It's freaking magical.
Mhm.
It's freaking
Yeah.
magical.
Yeah. I love that. And as we go down the line and like I do work from the top down, but you can totally do like bottom up too, depending on the
Mhm.
person and where they're at and
What
their
feels good for them.
preferences.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can usually feel that on yourself, or I can usually feel that on a client, like, okay, this is where we're at, and this is
Mhm.
this is their soul kind of gives me direction because they're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is what I'm craving. Like they
Mhm.
tell you,
Yeah.
whether they may not do it verbally, like even like physically or just through conversation in different ways. So, but I'm just explaining it from top down. And the next one would be the behavior.
Yeah.
When you say getting safe in your body after you've had those conversations with your fears, it is a lot easier to say like, "Ah, we are safe now," when fear comes up. Because because failure or because rejection or whatever it is I fear is no longer associated with something bad.
Mhm.
It's now it has a better understanding, and now I could feel that in my body that I'm okay.
Mhm.
Like everything's safe. I don't need to
Mhm.
people please. Because
Yeah.
if somebody does reject me, it's direction. They're not meant to be in my life anymore.
Mhm.
And when you start putting that into practice in the beginning, it's like, oh, okay, like it's tough. But then you
Mhm.
do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. You're like, ah, okay, I'm watching my life get better.
Yeah.
Like I might be alone for a little while if you're stuck in the people pleasing pattern we're talking about. But then you get back to this place where, like, okay, now I get to fill my life with the right people, given I have boundaries, given I know how to say no, and all
Mhm.
of those things. So it's nice because your body actually starts to correlate with your mind. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, my mind believes like everything is going to be okay. So now my body can feel that way. And your
Yeah.
body may still have visceral reaction and you may have to have conversations with it. Say
Yeah.
like, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're good now. We're okay now.
Yeah.
And that's when you can change that outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So it's pretty cool how it all works out and how it all plays out for yourself and, like, when it comes down to really breaking those patterns.
100%. And
Yeah,
I just love all of this too because all of this aligns with what feels like something that's always been very important to me, and that's like being able to claim your own power to create your own reality, you know?
yeah. People don't
Eh,
really consciously know all the time that they really are still stuck in what I call child brain. Like, they think
Mm,
they are in child brain, like, their brain thinks they're still under somebody else's roof, under somebody else's control, and they can't make their own decision.
mhm.
They forget that they're an autonomous adult, whether they're still in their parents' home or not, like, you
Yeah,
have all the abilities and skills to create a life that you want to if you want to.
yeah,
And you could say that for
100%.
society too.
Yeah.
Society can take a hold of you too, but this doesn't have to.
Mhm.
So, it is pretty crazy when you
Yeah.
really, really do start to see the world in a new light.
Oh, I love that.
Mm,
And I entirely agree. I'm prepping to do an episode on like victim consciousness and like the really
mhm,
sneaky ways that we disempower ourselves, and it's going to be so juicy.
mm,
Because again, I think it's incredibly normalized to outsource our power and to kind of stay in a like, "Oh, I just don't know why this is happening to me, and I just don't know what to do, and I guess I'll just have to wait for that to happen for me." Like it's just very normalized. And I don't even say that in a place of judging or being mad that that is the way that it is. I understand why that is. A lot of times it's because we just don't know how, or
mhm,
maybe we haven't even realized that we can and that we should be the ones who are creating and generating what we want for ourselves, that
mhm.
we both have the blessing and the curse of being responsible for bringing that to life, you know? And I just think it's like a very fascinating topic to look at. So for everybody who has heard that concept before, is embodying that concept of like my life, my behaviors, myself doesn't have to be the way that it is now. It gets to be whatever I feel like I want it to be, whatever would feel like it feels best to me, would make me the happiest. That there are many, many, many ways to approach that and to create that for yourself, including this very, general overview of this process of starting to break patterns and work with limiting beliefs, like
Mhm.
Lauren outlined. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was beautiful. Thank you for having me just be able to have a space to explain this and bring more awareness to like if you are in a pattern, like, oh my gosh, maybe I am in a pattern. Like, oh, I don't have to live like this. Oh my gosh, I can change my life. And
Mhm.
it's beautiful. It really does. When you change, the world changes. So if each and every
Mhm.
one of us can take a little bit of this and just bring it out into the world, share it with a friend too, like we can really live in a better world.
I 100% agree with that.
Mm.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode. Before you go, Lauren, I would love for you to tell us where we can find you, if people are interested in working with you, like give us all of the details for the listeners.
Totally. So my Instagram is full of content just like this, talking about patterns in bite-sized pieces. If you want to get to know more of patterns, at Law Plant is my Instagram. And if you want more information, then I just dropped or am dropping today a free masterclass on breaking patterns. So that'll be in the link in my Instagram bio, or you can find it on my website, lawplantcoaching.com. And I also offer 2 ways to work with me, which is through one-on-one. We can do 12 weeks together, or we can do 24 weeks together, or we can do a 90-minute breakthrough session. So I recommend, if you have just one struggle that you're struggling with and you just need clarity immediately, the breakthrough session, or if you want to work long-term one-on-one, usually on a free discovery call, we'll discover if you are more needing 12 weeks or 24 weeks.
I love that. And the law plan is that LA plant?
L Yep, LAUPLANTE. Mhm,
Lauplante. And I'm going to have this in the show notes too, so you guys will be able to get to that.
perfect.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And you guys know my info, healingwithbree.net. That's where I have my single sessions where you can do a single Akashic Records channeling, an energy healing session with me virtually. Or I am still enrolling a couple people in my coaching program. So you can work with me for 3 or 6 months. We're doing the deep healing work. We're doing the soul alignment work.
Woohoo!
We're incorporating channeling and energy healing and all of this into doing that healing and reprogramming and all that wonderful stuff. So you can reach out to me there or on my Instagram, which is my main platform at healingwithbree.net. So thank you everybody for listening today, and I hope you all have a wonderful week.